Okay, we're starting the 6th chapter. As we said yesterday, the subject is the difference between the chassid, who's a truly pious person, and the person who conquers his evil inclination. So let's start again. Let's just get the context. The philosopher said that someone who conquers his evil inclination, even though the actions that he does are good actions, but he does the good actions while desiring the bad actions and longing for them. And he overcomes his desire. And he operates against what motivates him. The motivations that come from the powers and abilities and of his soul, his desires, and the character traits that he has, those are motivations that he has, and he exerts his will to overcome them. And he does the good actions while having pain from so doing.
On the envelope was written Rabbi.
What?
The check on the envelope was written Rabbi.
The check, there was no check.
No check, no, on the envelope what was written.
Oh, I made a mistake.
Yeah, I'm just worried I might have got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Sorry.
Now, mitzvah, we have to be very careful here with mitzvah. And again, it's Arabic. It doesn't mean that he regrets doing it. It means he has pain in doing it. There's tsar. The tsar is denying the motivations that he has to do it. But of course, he understands that what he's doing is right, and he'll have a certain satisfaction, and even pride in doing what's right. So he's not regretting doing it, but there is pain in doing it because he's got to deny those parts of his personality which would have led him to act differently. So that's the philosopher's description of the one who overcomes his evil inclination. But the chassid, the truly pious person, he is drawn in his actions by his essential motivations and his desires and his character. That is to say, his essential motivations motivate him to do the right thing, motivate him to do the good, in which case there's no struggle. And then he does the good actions because he desires and is longing for the good actions. And the position that the philosophers adopt is that the chassid, who follows his inclinations and follows his desires and does the good thing because he and his judgment and his actions and his motivations are all in tune with one another, they're all aimed at doing the good thing, he is superior to the one who conquers his evil inclinations. They did admit that one who conquers his evil inclination is like the truly pious one in many ways, but still, necessarily, his... The door is open? Is it talking outside? Okay. In many ways, but it's still his level of achievement, his level of moral quality is less than that of the one the chassid is greater than that of the one who wants evil but conquers his spirit for evil. The very fact that he desires to do evil is a moral demerit. It's a moral fault. And our sources, well, he's been quoting the philosophers up until now, Our sources, for example, a pasuk in Mishlei in Proverbs, Nefesh Rosha Ivsa Ra. The soul of the wicked desires evil. So that sounds like if you desire evil, you're wicked. And it says concerning the joy of the chassid in doing the good things that he does, and the pain of he who is not a chassid in doing them, which is what the philosophers pointed out. The verse gives the opposite. It gives the same conclusion. Simcha l'tzadik asos mishpat. When a tzaddik does mishpat, does the right thing, the just thing, he's joyous about doing it. So, that's what the philosopher said. Because he wants to do it, because he desires to do it, because he's longing to do it, when he does it, he has only joy, only happiness. I think it's Mechita Lepole Oven, and when the people who are evildoers, when they have to do something good, it's terrible. It hurts them. So it sounds to me now like the philosophers took a position, and at least King Solomon in Proverbs agrees with that position. Zeu hanira midivrei Torah, meaning verses, the written Torah. Hato'eim lamar shehizkiru philosophic, and that seems to be consistent with what the philosophers said. Yeah.
Is it possible for someone to move from categories of, say, this Beinoni category to the Chassid category of fighting their evil inclination to do the right thing, and then actually getting to a point where they derive joy doing the right thing, and it isn't so much a battle, but they're actually just deriving joy from...
I think that's right. You can graduate from one to the other. So I think now whether the philosophers would credit that. Yeah, I think he would credit that. Yeah, it is possible.
Because what made me think of that was just in Tehillim 23, the pasuk, and the commentary, there's commentary on that line that says when something is done repetitively, it becomes second nature, and Dovid HaMelech's request of God was that he should do so much goodness and kindness with others that it would become his second nature. And so this idea of a second...
That's not in the words at all.
Well, this is...
On the contrary,
yes.
The commentators all point out, the words there say, goodness and kindness will pursue me. Pursue me. Ach tov chesed yirdefuni. They're chasing after me. And the implication is he's running away from them. Something's pursuing you. If something describes pursuing you, the implication is you're running away from them. All the commentators ask, why is he running away from them?
Yes.
And they say because you don't recognize that it's goodness and kindness. You think it's something else. You don't realize what the Baruch is doing for you.
I see.
Right. And the Vishavti is the conclusion that he would like to get to, but doesn't indicate anything in the verse. I'm wondering what commentaries you're looking at.
And could that be the difference between the Chassid and the Beinoni? The Chassid knows that when goodness and kindness is chasing after him, so to speak, and so he doesn't run away from it. He knows what's good. I don't know.
The way this is coming out of the sky. So that's what the philosophers and the verses in the written Torah, including the Tanakh, agree to. Now, when we analyzed the words of the sages, that means the Talmudic sages and the Midrash and so forth and so on, in this issue, we found them having the opposite opinion, that someone who desires to do prohibitions, he desires to violate prohibitions, and longing for them, and then conquers his evil inclination and does the right thing, he has the higher position. He is more perfect than someone who doesn't desire them at all. And someone who, when he avoids, let me keep this, was it? than someone who doesn't desire them and doesn't have any pain when he avoids them, the criminal actions. And they made the following statement, which is a couple of statements I'm going to quote from the Gemara now, which are really very strikingly opposite to what we said before. They said that the more a person is exalted and perfect, the more his desire to do the transgressions is, and the more his pain in avoiding them is. And here's one of the things that they said. If you have two people, and A is greater than B in spirituality and righteousness and so forth and so on, his evil inclination to do evil is bigger. He has bigger desires to violate, bigger desires for crime. That's not at all like what the philosophers said. They would say that as you go up the ladder, your desire to do wrong goes down, becomes less and less, to the point where it disappears. No, Chazal said the bigger you are, the more desire you have to do the wrong thing. And they even said that the one who conquers his evil inclination gets a greater reward. And this is what it says, L'fum Tzara Agra. Now here, I was just reading this in the Maharal. You have to be very little careful. The words in Hebrew mean just according to the pain and difficulty you have in doing the mitzvah. That's how your reward is calculated. Pain and difficulty doesn't have to mean evil inclination. It could mean money. It could mean time. It could be so on and so on. The Maharal, I guess maybe he was coming from this Rambam, takes it. The Rambam is taking it to mean evil inclination, which says don't do it. Don't do it. And the pain and difficulty in overcoming the evil inclination gets you more reward. Well, you're not getting more reward because you're on a lower level, because you're inferior. That's not the way the reward works. And even more than that, than these two statements, which are just descriptive statements, there's another statement in the rabbinic literature which commands you to have desires for evil. It actually commands you to have it. Mm-hmm. And it prohibits a person from saying, oh, it doesn't bother me to avoid eating snails or cheeseburgers and so on. I don't care about them anyhow, so forth and so on. No, a person shouldn't say that. And here's the statement as it's written. Yeshivat Ohr said, I'll read it in Hebrew now, I'll translate it. Lo yomar adam, a person should not say, I can't eat cheeseburgers. I can't wear clothes with linen and wool in them. I can't violate sexual morality. Person should not say I can't. Ella, what should he say? He should say, Efshi, I can. I can. But what can I do? My Father in heaven made a law that I can't do it. Now I think we have to be a little careful with the words. Efshi doesn't mean I don't have enough money to do it, or I don't have enough strength to do it, and so forth and so on, or I don't live in the right country to do it. Efshi means my nature doesn't want it. I would never do it on my own. I just don't do things like that. And then there's a Mishnah which says the opposite of this. Okay, how does that? Snails? You got to be kidding. In France, they eat chocolate-covered ants. Oh, come on. Chocolate-covered ants. Give me a break. I'm not going there. I'm not going there. Leave me alone. Don't say that. Say that I can, meaning I would love it. I would enjoy it. How do I know that's what it means? Because the statement of Chazal ends with, but what shall I do? My Father in heaven commanded me not to. Meaning, if he didn't command me, I would be there. So EFG doesn't mean I don't have money and so forth and so on. It means my own desires, my own character wouldn't let me do that. Don't say that. Say they would, and I would be there, and I would enjoy it. I'm just not doing it because the Kodesh Baruch Hu commanded me not to do it. So the Rambam points out that the rabbinic literature has a very strong position. You should have an evil inclination. You should have it. And you should acknowledge it. And then acknowledge that the reason why you're not doing it because the Kodesh Baruch Hu told you not to do it. Not because your very nature demands that you not do it. That it's built into your desires and your character that you wouldn't do it. Meaning, according to what the philosophers say, that means that even if God may have any commands on the subject, you would still do what's right. And that's already going to be a key to understanding the lesson the Rambam wants to bring from this. Yeah. May, you had a question?
Yeah. So, according to this position, there's some the person himself should understand that there's a constant struggle.
That's right. It's a constant struggle. Well put. And the struggle is the highest position you can be in. And if you've been programmed one way or another to sail smoothly without struggle, that's not a benefit. That's not a great position to be in. Whereas for philosophers, it's wonderful. It doesn't make any difference why you want to pay your bills. If you want to pay your bills and you pay your bills, that's on the level of being a chassid. Because what you want and what's right are in tune with one another. So I think you're putting your finger on something. What the philosophers are talking about is something where there's no relationship to Kodesh Baruch Hu, and there's no avoda, there's no service of Kodesh Baruch Hu in what you're doing. But now you understand why the Rambam put that position from two sources. It also comes from King Solomon. So you can't say, well, the poor philosophers don't know about God, they don't know about service of God, and therefore they're just talking about having good character. Because King Solomon said the same thing. So something else has to be going on here. As I said yesterday, the real question will be, why does he quote the philosophers at all? Just simply say, King Solomon said one thing, and the Talmud said something else. How do we reconcile the contradiction? Well, you'll see, he himself is going to explain. You want to say something?
So is the constant struggle necessary to keep elevating one's service to HaKadosh Baruch Hu?
Let's see if that's true. That's an interesting question. I don't know. Let's take a person who is naturally in love with justice. When confronted with an opportunity to cheat or to steal or to lie, doesn't come up on the screen. I just don't do that sort of thing. And now let's imagine that my neighbor is a victim. Am I going to go and save him? Well, maybe, but maybe not. I won't do injustice. And I won't do it because of my character. But it doesn't follow that I'll save him from injustice. If justice is a divine value, then I could increase my service with Kodesh Baruch Hu by saving him from the injustice also. So I could definitely elevate my commitment to justice above and beyond simply my own commitment not to do injustice.
Yes.
So I think maybe there could be a developmental feature there.
Yes, it seems like something like that example where once you can overcome most of your own struggles, you can help other people with their struggles.
100%.
100%,
yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so now he says, and actually I have here, let's do this. Give me a chumash, please. Rashi, who says a very similar thing. Thank you very much. I don't know how I found this. I put the note here myself. Rashi Kavav, Perik Kav, 2026 in Rashi, in Vayikra. 20. 2026. Yeah. This is the end of Parshas Kedoshim. Yeah. So this the verse says, "Be simply Kedoshim, you shall be holy to me, Ki Kadosh Ani, because I am holy. Because Ki Kadosh Ani Hashem, I am holy, I Hashem. And I have separated you from the other peoples to be mine." So Rashi says, I have separated you from the other peoples to be mine. In other words, it's a condition. If you succeed in distinguishing yourself from them, then you'll be mine. And if not, then you're given over to Nebuchadnezzar and his other friends who are going to conquer you and destroy you. Minayin shelo. Now here's the quotation which the Rambam brought. Minayin shelo yomar adam nafshi kotza v'basa chazir. A little different in content. How do I know a person should not say, my soul is disgusted by cheeseburgers? So here you see that here it's much clearer than what the Rambam quoted. The Rambam says, don't say it's impossible. But here it says, nafshi kotza. My soul is disgusted by cheeseburgers. Now it says efshi. The Rambam's formulation. It's impossible for me to wear linen and wool in my clothes. But that's preceded by the description my soul is disgusted by. So the efshi here is not I don't have enough money and I don't live in the right country and so forth. That's what it means. My soul is disgusted by it, and that's why I don't do it. Aval yoma efshi, but rather I say you can. I can. So I think the phraseology in Rashi brings out the way I explained it in the Rambam. Because I said the first clause is, my soul is disgusted by it. That's what the impossibility is being referred to here. So apparently there were different texts in this statement of Chazal. But Rashi's text bears out the way I suggested that we have to read it in the Rambam. Okay, so now, says the Rambam, if you now understand the simple statement of the two positions that I have outlined to you, at the first thought, it seems like they contradict one another. Yeah, it certainly does, doesn't it? The one says, if you're conquering your desires, you're on a lower level. The other one says, if you're conquering your desires, you're on a higher level. That definitely sounds like a contradiction. But it's not true. They're both true. And there's no disagreement between them at all. Because what the philosophers count as evils are a certain subclass of Jewish responsibilities. What the philosophers count as evils, we would also count as evils, but they are a small subclass of Jewish responsibilities. And that's all they're talking about. That subclass that the philosophers are talking about, that's where, if you desire to violate, you have a sick soul. You have a sick mind. You have a sick heart. And that's why you're on a morally lower level. Even though you conquer your desires. And what things are they? They are the things which are famous and well known throughout mankind that are wrong. Like murder, stealing, two types of stealing, monetary thieving, where you deceive people about prices and so forth and so on. And to damage someone who didn't do evil to you, which means the desire to damage someone who did do evil to you might be okay. But the desire to damage someone who did. So you have to picture this person.
This fell.
What's that? Oh, sorry. Oh, it fell.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So you have got to picture this guy. Look at his new suit. Wow. Look at his new suit. My suit's 3 years old. I wonder if he's going to the beach. He's going to the beach. He's going to hang up the suit in the locker, go out to the water, and then I can get it. I can get his suit. So he follows him to the beach, and he watches him go to the locker. He takes off his suit, puts it in the locker. He's thinking, wow, 10 minutes, we have that suit. And then he puts a lock on the locker. No, he locked it up. He locked it up. I lost it. I lost that new suit that I was going to steal. Right? That's sick. That's sick. He's full of desire to steal. That's sick. Why? Because this is something that's clearly evil. It means his mind, which tells him it's evil, isn't in charge of who he is. It isn't in charge of what he does. It is in charge of what he wants. That's evil. That's a low, degraded, crass state to be in. Better a person should say, since I know it's wrong, I don't want to do it. I'm utterly opposed to it. It's wrong. The philosophers are talking about the evils that you know intuitively or from experience you know are bad. And they're telling you that not only shouldn't you do those evils, but you should be the kind of person whose mind and whose character and whose preferences and whose desires are for being straight. That's a better moral condition to be in. But only for those. To repay the goodness that people do to you with evil. To treat your parents with contempt and similar things. And these are the mitzvos which are described by the Gemara in Yuma, things which, if the Torah had not been written, it would have been appropriate to write them. Meaning, you could know all by yourself that they are correct rules. They're rules which, even if the Torah had not written them, you would have known that they should have been written. You would have known that they have to be kept. That's where, if there's a break between your will to follow them and your nature to violate them, that's an inferior position. And now he makes a remark from his philosophical point of view. There's a title that some of the later scholars give to these mitzvos, and he then says about these later scholars who have a kind of sickness in their understanding of language. They don't understand how to use language appropriately, and therefore they've given them a title, but it's an inappropriate title. They called them alamat kavin, mitzvos sichlios, logical mitzvos. For the Rambam, the term logical mitzvos does not mean mitzvos that you can see are right or wrong. For him, logical mitzvos are mitzvos that logic demonstrates. Like the oneness of God, like the all-powerfulness of God, God as being creator and so forth and so on. It has nothing to do with stealing and murder and so forth and so on. So he's critical of their terminology, but the idea is the same idea. And he says that there's no doubt that a soul that desires any of those evils that the philosophers classify as evils and longs for them, that is a deficient soul, a low soul. And the high soul, the developed soul, the noble soul will not desire them at all. And when this person avoids these crimes, he'll have no pain in that at all. He won't suffer from that at all. Just like the philosopher said. And just like the pasuk in Mishlei, like the verse in Proverbs said. Okay, so that means that the reason why there's no contradiction between the philosophers and King Solomon on the one hand and the rabbis on the other hand is because they're talking about different groups of actions, different groups of rules. So the one that philosophers and actually King Solomon are talking about are the ones where your own knowledge of what's right and wrong already dictate that these are the things that should be done. And there it's correct that your soul and your desires and your motivations and all the rest should be in tune with what's right and should cost you nothing to do what's right. You shouldn't be pained when you do what's right. There should be no desire to do the wrong thing. But the items where the sages said conquering your evil spirit is superior and he gets greater reward, they are the mitzvos which you learn from tradition, where your mind would not tell you that there's anything significant about these rules, right or wrong. And that's true, that's correct. So it's these, if the Torah had not commanded them, they wouldn't be bad. They become bad only because the Torah says so. As opposed to the prior group, which the Gemara and Yuma said, if the Torah had not been written, you would have known they should have been written, because you would know for yourself that they're bad. These are the opposite. Where if the Torah had not been written, they wouldn't be bad. It's not that you wouldn't know that they're bad. They wouldn't be bad. They become bad only because the Torah says so. And that's why they said that a person should leave his soul in desire of them, and nothing should hold him back but the Torah. Only the Torah should hold him back. And he says, look now at the examples that the sages used to illustrate the idea that you should desire evil. What examples did they use? Well, they in fact used cheeseburgers and kilayim, the linen wool in your clothes, and forbidden sexual crimes, right? There, if the Torah hadn't prohibited them, you would never have known there was anything wrong. They didn't say, this is how if they had been fighting with the philosophers, this is what they should have said. They didn't say, a person shouldn't say, it's impossible for me to kill, or impossible for me to steal, or impossible for me to lie, but what can I do? My Father in heaven commanded. They didn't say that. No. They shouldn't say that. They should say, yeah, it's impossible for me, and I'm proud of the fact it's impossible for me. I wouldn't lie, I wouldn't steal, I wouldn't cheat, I wouldn't hurt anybody. Why would I do that? No, it's wrong. No, they only said it about things which, if the Torah hadn't commanded them, they wouldn't have been wrong. The only reason it's wrong to wear linen wool in your garments is because the Torah said so. If the Torah hadn't said so, there wouldn't be anything wrong with it. That's where you should have a desire to do the wrong thing, because there, having a desire to do the wrong thing doesn't violate your intellect. What the philosophers have on their side, in their side of the story, is that when a person desires to steal, or desires to murder, or desires to take advantage and lie and to cheat, his desires are in contradiction to his intellect. That's a sickness. Here, the desires for cheeseburgers and for suits from Paris, which have linen and wool in them, that desire doesn't violate your intellect. There's nothing wrong with wanting them. It's just that the Torah said not to do them, so they become forbidden. Now, this, so far, only gets us half the story, because at this point you hear that a person who has desires for these things isn't sick. There's nothing sick about his desires. But that doesn't yet say that having those desires is good. All we see now is that it isn't bad. It shouldn't be condemned. But the Rambam quoted, the third thing he quoted from the Gemara is where it says, you should have them. It's a positive feature in your religious life to have them. That we haven't gotten an explanation for yet.
What about being neutral to these?
Just one second.
Sorry.
Then these are what the Torah calls chukim. chukosai, my decrees. And the Gemara's phraseology there is chukim shechachati lecha en lecha reshus lahaher behem. The decrees that I have established for you, you have no permission to question them, debate them, criticize them, rebel against them, and these are the laws of the Torah that the other nations of the world use to raise objections against you. You have rules of justice, that's wonderful. You have rules of kindness, that's wonderful. You have rules not to eat cheeseburgers? What's that? That's not wonderful. You're just depriving yourself of something that's good. Well, internet wool in your clothing? Are you kidding? Why would you want to be against that? And that's exactly right. These are the ones which the Creator commanded us, and there's no logical explanation for them, although in the last sixth of the Guide of the Perplexed, he gives explanations, historical and sociological explanations of various kinds to the various mitzvahs. I'm not going into that now. But when an outsider looks at it, looks absolutely arbitrary and meaningless. And the Satan, the evil inclination, criticizes you on them. So what are you doing? Are you crazy? Why are you worried about that? Like the red heifer and the Siyal Mishtaleach on Yom Kippur, there's a certain sacrifice which is sent out to the desert to die, and it's called the Sa'ir, the goat, for Azazel. And Azazel is the name of some kind of thing that this is being offered to, and you say, why? How can you offer something that isn't to God? It's something else, and so forth and so on. The whole long story, and it sounds strange and weird and inconsistent with general Jewish principles. That's where the peoples of the world and the Satan start criticizing and undermining your self-confidence and all the rest. And that's where Kodesh Baruch Hu said, I'm telling you have to do it, you have to do it. Meaning that you're doing it because I told you, not for any other reason. Because not for any other reason, well, for sure, then it shouldn't be that you already desire to keep these laws. It shouldn't be that you should desire to keep these laws, like the philosophers said about those laws. Because then it wouldn't be true that this is my decree and you can't rebel against my decree. Meaning you're doing it only because I said so. So now we have two statements. We just still didn't get to the third, but we have if you have desires to violate these laws, nothing wrong with that, because it's not in contradiction to your intellect. And you shouldn't have desires to keep these laws, because you have desires to keep these laws. It doesn't show that you're doing it because I said so. But what about having no desires? Just being, blank, neutral. And then, of course, if it's neutral, it should be indifferent to you. And you do it. I say, why are you doing it? Well, left on my own, it would have been a matter of indifference. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, or maybe never. But Kodesh Baruch Hu told me not to do it, so I don't do it. Why is it that there must be a desire to violate? There must be a desire to violate. That's what that statement of Chazal said, and we still haven't gotten an explanation for that. Yeah, you wanted to ask a question?
I think you're about to. I was going to ask about the being neutral, so I think we're coming to the.
Good. Okay. So these laws that having the evil inclination for is a good thing are called chukim. And the others, which the philosophers talked about, are called in our language mitzvos. So now he says, I've explained to you what I told you, that some commandments you should be like what the philosopher said, and you should not have a desire to violate. Indeed, your desire should lead you to fulfill them. And the ideal person is not fighting with his evil inclination. And then there are the other ones where like what the Chacham said is the opposite. And he said this is a marvelous point and a marvelous reconciliation between the two positions. And the vocabulary that's used on the two sides shows that this is the right explanation, and that's what I wanted to teach you in this chapter. So now, we asked the question, why didn't the Rambam simply say that Solomon says one thing and the sages say something else, and reconcile it that way? I think it's because he wants to motivate what I told you and what he himself said to a great extent, that the idea that there are mitzvos where your desires should be in tune with the mitzvos and support you doing the mitzvos is because they are rational mitzvos, and that means that your desires are in tune with your reason. That's why it is that way. Bringing it from Solomon wouldn't necessarily tell you that, because you don't know what category of mitzvah Solomon is talking about, because Solomon's dealing with a Torah that has 613 mitzvahs of all kinds. If you bring the philosophers in, what your understanding is that this is because reason dictates them. And the reason why you have the explanation for the fact that if your desires are out of tune with those mitzvahs, you're in a bad situation, is because your desires are out of tune with what reason dictates is good. Those are not good desires. Those are bad desires. Maybe I can give you maybe I don't know how much this resonates with you intuitively. Let's take, for example, as an extreme example, a sadist who gets pleasure out of torturing other people. Oh, but he realizes that that's bad. That's bad. Shouldn't do that. And he's trained himself not to do it. But all of that, I could step on his foot, He won't even see me. Bang on his foot. I could do that. Shouldn't do that. No, it's wrong. Can't do that. Don't do that. How do you feel about such a person? Is this an elevated person, virtuous person, noble person? Because he wants to step on the other guy's foot, but he controls himself. Isn't that low, crass, sick? It definitely is low, crass, and sick. Right? He'd be much higher person if he said, step on somebody's foot. I'd never do that. What are you talking about? I'll cause him pain. I can't cause other people pain. So here you see intuitively that the desire to do the wrong thing is itself wrong.
Yes.
And these kinds of things. By the way, this is what's wrong. One of the many, many failures of utilitarianism, that it counts all pleasures equally. It has no room for evil pleasures. The pleasure of a sadist is an evil pleasure. It should not count in the calculus of the goodness of your action because it promoted pleasure, including the pleasure of the sadists. The pleasure of the sadists should not be counted in favor of an action, even though it's pleasure. But they, of course, for everything is determined by the goodness of pleasure, that action that promotes pleasure. They have no room for evil action, evil pleasure. The category can't exist for them. That's one of the many failures of utilitarianism. Hear that, Peter Singer. That's what the Rambam is talking about here. That the very desire for these things is a evil, and that's what King Solomon was talking about. He's saying now. Nefesh Rasha If Sarah, the soul of the wicked desires evil. This is a wicked person who wants to steal, who wants to murder, who wants to cheat, who wants to hurt, and so on and so on. And that is a bad soul. Now, I'm not saying that everybody would agree with this, but you hear where the Rambam is coming from. And now I think that the explanation for why you should have the desires to eat cheeseburgers is because of what he said, although he didn't spell it out fully in detail, but I think it follows. That if the purpose of these chukim, these decrees, is that your attitude should be, this is put upon me by God that I'm not allowed to criticize, think of objections, compromises, to undermine what's the motivation and so on and so on. I'm not allowed to do that. Well, if you told me I'm not allowed to do that, presumably, left to my own devices, I would do that. Just to tell me I'm not allowed to do that. Why would I do that? I'll do that because I want to escape from it. Because I don't want to keep it. I want to find a way to rationalize it away. And that means I have a desire to do it. So that part, I think, what I'll say here, indicates that we're depending upon the positive existence of desires to violate. Now we could add here that I hinted at this before. We could add here in these mitzvahs you show that you're serving Kodesh Baruch Hu. You're showing that. You're experiencing it as serving Him rather than myself, and rather than just confirming my good nature. And that's an indispensable element of a person's spirituality, to be serving God. Okay. So then, if you were in the philosopher's category, where all your desires and hopes and preferences and priorities are to do good, God doesn't have to come into the picture at all. You could bring Him in, but it doesn't have to. You don't show any service of God there at all. You're simply acting out your good nature. So I think that you could add that dimension, even though the Rambam doesn't say it explicitly. But this is an illustration of the Rambam's methodology, general methodology. He looks to see where there's agreement and where there's disagreement between the Torah and philosophical sources. And when there's disagreement, he simply wipes off the philosophical position. Dismisses it. But where there's agreement, he then says, here's a place where you can have your own grasp to a certain extent of what the Torah is doing, and he promotes that. Yes, ma'am.
I want to ask, what would be the way to deal with the wicked souls? We mentioned it, but...
Yeah, what to do with the wicked souls? Well, first of all, often these souls get that way through a kind of limited and gerrymandered experience. Rav Dessler writes about a case where you have a band of thieves who live in the hills, and they have their own little society, and they bring up their children, and they teach them that thieving is fine. The race goes to the swift, the battle goes to the strong, and stealing things from other people is fine. Just part of, political Darwinism. So the strong will dominate, and the weak will go by the wayside, and whatever crazy theories they have. And he never hears anything else. Mm-hmm. He never hears anything else. So he has a wrongly structured set of motivations because he's never been exposed to the alternative. But when you expose him to the alternative, then you can often, for another example is literature. I mentioned this before. Sensitive, either biographies or novels written by a sensitive reader. There are people, for example, whose attitude towards addicts is they're just lazy, irresponsible people. Well, if you know anything about addiction, you know that's not true. But he doesn't believe it. Now, take a story about an addict, which goes into his mind, it goes into his struggles, and shows the extent to which he's suffering and so forth and so on. Let this person read that book. He won't feel the same way about addicts as he did before. He'll say there was a whole world that I was totally unaware of. So you can change your perceptions, your preferences, your desires. Experience can do that. Mm-hmm. That's one way to do it. Here's where certain artistic expressions can be very powerful and very worthwhile. Mm-hmm. I know today I'm talking about reading books. I realize that's totally out of date. You wouldn't want to see a video. You wouldn't want to read a book. Okay, but that's the idea, to expose yourself to what it is and what it means, and then your travel does this for people. One of the reasons why people travel is because they see new things and it opens their eyes to things they never dreamt of, and they're affected by it. And they hope to be richer people, more mature people by seeing things that they hadn't experienced before. So I think experience is a large teacher of this. Okay.